My name is Vaughn, and I'm very honored to be here amongst Laotian friends and Vietnamese friends who I've known in the human rights community for a long time. I'd especially like to thank my wonderful colleague and friend, Madame Bouchon, from the Union of Lao Nation for inviting me, and to all the Laotian groups that are working for human rights and democracy in the diaspora. Sadly, I'm not Laotian, although I love everything Laotian except the government. I've visited Laos, and I love the people. I've traveled extensively in Southeast Asia, and Laos is one of the countries that really, the people are some of the friendliest, kindest, most generous, hospitable, wonderful people that I have met. And it is truly depressing when you think the government that they have to live under every day, because they are just an amazing people in the diaspora as well as in the country. I'm also a big fan of Laotian food, especially lao. And I also like the fact that I was told yesterday that lao means good fortune, and I think Laos needs some of that soon. So why am I here? I'm a human rights activist. I've worked for about 20 years, I'm quite old, since I was a student, on a range of human rights issues, both in the US and in Asia, and worked very closely with ethnic and religious minority groups and other marginalized communities. I have a soft space in my heart for the underdog. And I think that's why I really like Laos, because I worked on Burma and Vietnam and Cambodia, and there's a lot of attention on those countries. But on Laos, there hasn't been as much attention in the West as there should be. So the other reason I'm here is I'd like to quote the words of a hero of mine, an American social justice activist, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I don't think, those of us who live in democracies can be complacent about the rights that we have when we know that there are people, political prisoners, journalists, languishing in prison for exercising their basic and fundamental rights. It's also important because we have voices. Aung San Suu Kyi once famously said during when the Burmese regime was under the junta, please use your freedom to get us ours. And I think with Laos it's the same. You have a voice. We in the international community have a voice. And we need to use it to raise a voice with those who are silenced in Laos right now. As some of you have heard throughout the course of this conference, there is no freedom for civil society in Laos, and I emphasize that. I have worked in Vietnam, I have worked in China, I have worked in Burma and Cambodia, but Laos is truly, completely and utterly repressed. There is no space for civil society. There is no freedom of expression, there is no freedom of speech, there's no freedom of religion, there's no freedom of expression, of worship, there's no freedom of information, there is no transparency, the government has no accountability, there is no free press. If you read the Benchang Times, which is the English language paper which I read, you would think Laos was a paradise, and it is. It really is it's a beautiful country, but they tout growth rates of 8%, that they have, the rice crop is exceeding everyone's expectations. You see happy, smiling Laotians, and that's what you see in the press. And as you know, the press is almost 100% controlled by the government. And you know what happens in countries where the press is controlled by the state. You have that small thing called propaganda. The propaganda is so extreme that for many Laotians who, average Laotians, that's the only kind of news that they get. So they know nothing else. And that is a tragedy. And that is one of the things that we need to be making sure that we're getting information to our brothers and sisters in Laos in ways that we can, so that they know what's happening outside of Laos. Laos has one of the highest rates of corruption. For a country that has such a high level of food produce and that has such great natural resources, it's one of the most food insecure countries in the world. More than 50% of kids under the age of 5 are severely malnourished. That is a violation against humanity. The government does not do anything to protect the rights of the people, and it also does not provide services to the people. So you have civil society groups trying to create a space, like the activist Sambat Sampon, who was doing the work that the government should have been doing, and for that he was disappeared. And that's also an atrocity. It is with very mixed feelings, because I love Laos and I think it's a beautiful country and that's why it's so tragic in terms of what the government is doing. And there are things though, I'm a human rights activist, but I'm also an optimist. And I'm also Buddhist, and I believe in karma. And I think there's stuff that we can do. You in the Laotian community have a voice. You have the freedom to express yourself. You in the European community have a voice. You who live in Australia and Canada have a voice. You need to be talking to your legislators and your congressional members when they meet with their Laotian counterparts what needs to be done. And there are things that can be done. First and foremost, whenever a delegation from your country goes to Laos or meets with government officials, human rights and democracy need to be mentioned. You also need to insist that the EU and the US that gives Laotian huge amounts of foreign assistance, that goes directly to the people and not to line the coffers of the regime's cronies in Swiss bank accounts. That money should be given to the people. You must insist that in every trade delegation, every corporation that is investing in Laos raises the issue of human rights. You cannot have a country that is stable, that is a good place for investment, if you don't have the basic rights of the people guaranteed. The people will take it for a certain amount of time, but after that they will get fed up, and if there is no security, there is no justice without peace and democracy. One of the things that I ask you very practically to do is ASEAN is taking over, Laos is taking over the ASEAN chair in 2015, and we have an opportunity to attract attention to Laos. Laos wants to be seen as this big player in the region. Well, that's fine, that's good, but that comes with certain responsibilities. ASEAN has a human rights mechanism. Laos is going to chair that human rights mechanism. So that's going to be a little bit ironic if they're not promoting human rights at home and they're chairing ASEAN. So let's figure out a way in the next 6 months to push our legislators that when Laos chairs ASEAN, it is also considering its own human rights record at home. I will end now by saying, I really believe, and I think that I believe in people power. And I believe that people can change and regimes can change. And I also don't think that governments that keep their power because they are terrified of people can last forever. Yes, it's been 30 years. It was 30 years in Burma. Burma is changing. Laos will change as well.